Kathryn Hahn is an absolute gift, and this show is so much better for having her than it ever could have been without. I want to start by getting that in there because she is awesome and has been like incredible for the show, and these last 2 episodes in particular have really showcased her in a really awesome way. Welcome to our R-rated series on WandaVision as we're talking about episode 8, previously on. So a few things right off the bat before we jump in. First of all, like I said, Kathryn Hahn as Agnes, aka Agatha Harkness, is an awesome use of her, and this is the best she's been in this entire show, in which she's already been great. The other thing is the previous episode I didn't give an in-video ranking for, and I would give it a 7, and that's for what was the actual name of the episode? Breaking the Fourth Wall. And I think I mentioned this before. It's not so much about how much it's not just how much I liked the episode, or how much it like pulls things together, but it's kind of all of these things together in addition to like production value and look and feel and like how it all portrays all together. I thought it was very cool from a story standpoint, and it was still very good. It just wasn't like the most amazing, in terms of all that. Obviously, some of the big like holy shit moments were giant. Same is going to be the case here, not for the ranking, but for the episode itself. So this episode previously on, I think, I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure in the last, previously on R-rated, I wouldn't be surprised if episode 8 wound up playing off the clip show trope. Not necessarily in the way that everything is like, here's bits and pieces from the show so far, but rather Agatha, I guess, starts messing with everybody and like forcing the show into its different like eras and stuff or something. I don't really know. These feel like way wilder guesses than they did before, and that's literally what they do. It's not clips from the show so far, but it's literally segments from Wanda's past as a big through line for this episode. So prediction 1, boom, called it. That was actually, I was not expecting for that one to come out, to be the big one, but that actually worked really well. Also the Agatha All Along sequence from the end of the last episode was a big Munsters gag, and I was trying to figure out while I was watching and then talking about it, I'm like, it's so familiar, and I know that as soon as I see it, I'm going to be embarrassed that I missed it. But yeah, the Munsters. Let's see. So I like there's like a purple tinge to the Marvel Studios intro this time at the end, and it disappears in a waft of smoke, similar to how in the first episode it faded to like that black and white monochrome of old 50s TVs. We actually open on 1693 Salem, Massachusetts, where we see Agatha in her witch's coven. So at first it's presented like a bunch of villagers burning a witch for practicing witchcraft, but it turns out that the ones who are trying to, execute her are her own coven of witches, and she had sought out magic above her station, basically. Everybody seems to be kind of thinking that this is going to go in the direction of Mephisto in the end, and with this show connecting in some way to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I suspect that the idea is at the end of this season, Mephisto is going to have like noticed what's going on, and Doctor Strange will fight Mephisto as like their big thing there. Excuse me. But so she has some kind of magic she's not supposed to have, and her coven is trying to execute her, but as they do so, they have this like blue beam of energy, and after a couple seconds, the beams going into her start to turn purple, and it's a very subtle difference. It's hard to really describe, but when they're doing their blue magic, you can see that it's energy coming from them and going into her, and it's supposed to be like energy to like kill her or whatever. But when it turns purple, it very subtly changes from energy being blasted into her into energy she's pulling in from them. Some of their physicality changes too, as opposed to like, haha, you start to see like their arms get longer and they're kind of like struggling with it. And it feels like they're being drawn in, which is kind of a really cool effect. As this is happening, they're like, it's not so. They look like they're shriveling. Like it could be that they're aging or that their soul is being taken, but it generally looks like they're being shriveled out. Like they're like all of like everything inside of them is being absorbed out. The leader of the coven, the head witch, basically, she refers to Agatha refers to her as mother. I don't know if that's a literal or figurative, but she tries to do something with it. She has this kind of crown, which will be important later, but she had like an energy crown looking thing. I think it had 4 points to it. But even then, Agatha's able to overpower her, kills her, and we return to the present, right at the end of the last episode where Agatha, I gotta get past saying Agnes now. Agatha kind of taunts Wanda for a bit and is like, yeah, you can't read my, like Wanda's trying to read her mind or do something to her mind, and she can't because Agatha has Agatha just generally has some abilities that Wanda can't overpower, but also in Agatha's house in general, she has these runes in the basement that she uses to create a circle of protection that basically means that only her magic is going to work there, which is interesting for a number of reasons, because one, it does seem to confirm that Wanda's abilities, while they were given to her by the Mind Stone, which we'll get into in a little bit, are magical in nature, as opposed to, like, it got discussed in the first Thor movie, I guess, I think it was, where Jane Foster is saying, like, they're talking about, you know, the magic of the Asgardians, but the idea being that it's not magic, it's just science that's advanced in a certain way that it's indistinguishable from magic, which is a common kind of science fiction trope as well. I'm trying to remember which author kind of coined that notion. I'm just going to say Asimov and guess, but the point being, this one seems to go the other way with it. This one seems to suggest that, like, up until now, it seems like, okay, there's some intricately complex magic going on. The Mind Stone being an Infinity Stone means that it's, you know, in some way intrinsically linked with the others, and she has essentially reality warping abilities that are still somehow scientific, like they work off of the science of, and like perhaps magic in general in the Marvel Cinematic Universe still is technically scientific. It's just channeled a certain way. But the fact that she has a runic circle that basically nullifies Wanda's powers suggests that Wanda's magic is actually magic and not some kind of science-based thing. This also kind of explains why in the previous episode, I think it was Billy, I get them mixed up a lot. Wiccan, the one who has telepathy as one of his things, couldn't read Agnes's at the time thoughts. I had assumed it was because Wanda had kind of scooped her out, but it's actually because she just prevents it. She just nullifies and doesn't allow it. So, you know, some of that, Agatha just completely dominates her in her basement. She like binds her with magic. She shows off that she can do transmutation and she can do mind control on flies or whatever that's supposed to be. It was a huge bug. And I don't know what it was. Like, it could have been, I don't think it was like a cockroach. I don't really know what it was. It looks like just it was a giant fly. So maybe it was just like aren't bot flies bigger or something? I don't know. Big fly. I'm just going to call it big fly. But she does all this stuff. She has it crawl on Wanda's face, which is disgusting, and then has it turn into a bird, and then catches it and really is not very nice to it, and throws it to the side where it turns back into a fly or whatever, right in front of Senor Scratchy, the rabbit, who just eats it, which is also disgusting. She said that she made fake Pietro, and it's hard to tell whether she means that in the sense that fake Pietro literally does not exist in any capacity, and that's a conjuring spell, or if it was a person and she's been controlling him and making him into a fake Pietro. I think the idea is that he's a construct, but I'm not positive. We also do not see him or Monica at all in this episode. In the stinger of the previous episode, fake Pietro finds Monica, says Snooper's going to snoop, and that's it. We don't see them. We don't see them in this episode either, so they're going to come back in the finale. I don't know what the capacity for that is going to be. I'm to see how that goes. But so, yeah, essentially what we get here, the real conflict. So this episode, we're going to get into the origin of what happened here because that's kind of the focus of the episode. But basically, Agatha showed up in the first place because she essentially sensed that there was some massive amount of spells all going off at once. And she's been around for over 400 years, over 300 years. So, something like that would obviously set her off. She'd notice that something's up, so she goes to investigate. And she's been trying to confuse Wanda, essentially, and exploit her emotional weaknesses in her time of grief in order to kind of expose the source of her power. Because the idea is Agatha has noticed the kind of magic she's using. She can do mind control. She can change the shape of things around her. But with Agatha, it sounds like it's not permanent. When she changes something, it's just an illusion. With Wanda, it appears to be permanent. It's a real change of reality. And that's the crux of it, is that Agatha recognizes that Wanda's magic is so much more powerful and so much more capable than her own. She even talks about how, like, when she created this world that they're in, the Hex, like, she's mind controlling people from miles away to do intricate activities, sometimes less so. Obviously, when she was in a great amount of stress, she was less focused on it. But, like, she's able to run an entire town. They all have day-to-day lives. They all have things that they're doing that is entirely subconscious. Whereas for Agatha, despite being perhaps the strongest witch around and having been around for centuries, still has to actually cast a spell. She has to see what she's doing and she has to manipulate it herself. She can't do anything automatically. She needs to handle it herself in order to make it work, whereas Wanda seemingly did all of this by accident. So Agatha's pissed because she wants power and she wants to be the ultimate witch, and so she decides that the only way that she's going to find out how Wanda became as powerful as she was is that they're going to take a trip through time. They're going to go back and look at the most traumatic and eventful moments in her life to try to figure out why she is the way she is. So what you wind up with, so we go back, I think it was to four specific time periods. The first one we go back to is Wanda's childhood. We get to see the apartment that she grew up in. We get to see young Pietro, young Wanda, and we get to see their parents, Oleg and Irina Maximoff. I think there's been a lot of folks who wanted Magneto to turn up in some way in the show, and at this point, I feel pretty conclusive saying that that's not going to happen at all, and I'm glad they're not going to. Mostly because, like, the introduction of Pietro and Wanda and their backstory back in Age of Ultron made it pretty clear that Oleg and Irina, and previously Pietro and Wanda, were just normal people. Like, they're just people. Though, there's the question, and this episode actually makes it kind of ambiguous if that was necessarily true, or if Pietro and Wanda always had something a little special about them, or, in addition to that, does everybody have that? Is everybody, like, to lean into kind of, if anyone's seen Heroes, there's kind of a theory that runs through the show, especially in the third season, or the third chapter of the show, into the fourth, which is, what if everybody has some kind of ability that can be unlocked? They actually come up with a way to generate abilities in people at various points in the show. And at least at least two characters who did not have abilities are able to manifest abilities as a result of this kind of experimentation. And that's kind of what I'm wondering here is, were Wanda and Pietro given their powers by the Mind Stone, or did they already have a little something in them and the Mind Stone helped just unlock it? But so we see their childhood, and we see Oleg come home with a big old suitcase of VHS tapes and DVDs that he's planning to sell the next day. There's some interesting stuff in there. There's like I Love Lucy and I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched, all of these things that have been referenced in the show, and Malcolm in the Middle as well, which is interesting because the show didn't air until 2000, and I get the feeling that the first DVD didn't come out the first season DVD probably didn't come out until like 2001, 2002. And this scene takes place in 1999. It's a really minor foible on that. Like, that's a really minor anachronism, all things considered. It just kind of stood out to me a little. It was like, they could have let the Malcolm in the Middle DVD not be there, because they watch the Malcolm in the Middle turns up later in the episode, like being watched. Like, they could have skipped past that and left it as a reference later. So minor production error on that in terms of like timeline and all that. But so he's got a bunch of those, and it turns out that the Maximoff family has a TV night. I don't know if it's every week. That'd be the implication, is that it's a weekly thing for them. And they use that as an opportunity to practice English, which is kind of cute. That's actually not the first time that's happened in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you remember back in The Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, when he was in, was it Brazil? I think it was Brazil. He was watching Sesame Street in Portuguese in order to learn how to speak Portuguese. He got pretty decent at it, though. He did say, "You wouldn't like me when I'm hungry," which is close. But yeah, so that's kind of a neat like through line back to that. And also, that's kind of a pretty common piece of advice if you're trying to learn a language. A great way to do that is to watch media from that country. Especially children's media, since the whole idea is, so again, Incredible Hulk, he's watching Sesame Street in Portuguese, which is great because that's meant for children who don't really know how words and things work yet. So learning the most basic language skills that way is about as natural as it's going to be for people who grew up in an era with television. So they do that. They have their TV night, and Wanda has a favorite show. It turns out to be the Dick Van Dyke Show. And she even has a favorite episode, it seems like, or she just specifically knows this is the episode I want to watch tonight. So they sit down, they watch the Dick Van Dyke Show, and right as everyone's just kind of like settled in and feeling good, bomb goes off. And like, you just kind of feel it. You kind of have the feeling through the entire scene. It's like, I know what this is going to be, because it can't be anything else. In Age of Ultron, Pietro and Wanda describe in detail that their apartment, and this is the scene we're seeing, their apartment was bombed when they were 10, and there were 2 bombs. The first one blew up the apartment, and they hid under some furniture, and the second one landed and didn't go off. And you actually see the Stark Industries missile land in the living room. No sign of Oleg and Irina. No sign of them dead either, so, like, who knows? But, like, they're not around. They're probably blown to smithereens. Pietro and Wanda crawl under, I think, the couch, and the Stark missile is just sitting there with just this slow blinking red light, which is actually, we've seen that in a couple spots in the show. There are some street lights that have kind of had a very similar kind of imposing red blinking light. The Stark toaster also had a slow blinking red light, so there were some like uncomfortable parallels that were being made there. This episode did not take place within the fake world of the TV, so there was no commercial, and I think we're done with those at this point. But so they hang out under the couch, and I'm so glad that I called that the reason that everything has this classic TV feel is that television was important to Wanda in some way, and I double called it because as they're sitting there waiting for the missile to blow up or not blow up or them get rescued, Wanda looks and sees the TV is still playing the Dick Van Dyke Show and kind of uses that to calm her, to like steal her nerves a little bit and say that like at the end of the episode everything is fine and none of it was real. And they're just kind of like using that to like mentally get through it. So like, I think I called that in a previous episode that like that was going to be the point of the TV, is that that's always been a very specific place of comfort for Wanda, that's kind of how she centers herself with TV. And so like, which is a part of the reason why there is a focus within the show, within a show, that they watch TV within the show, within a show, in those earlier episodes. So that was pretty cool that I got to, that I figured that one out too. That whole scene is so heartbreaking.
and so painful. And Agatha is like, kind of like, okay, I see. So this is this, but I still don't get it. But because Wanda reaches out at one point, and Agatha's like, so you stopped it then? You used a something or other hex. She's like, I didn't do anything. It just didn't go off. The bomb was a dud. Like, nothing happened. And Agatha's like, are you sure? And she's like, I'm pretty sure. And so they go to their second little Ghost of Christmas Past zone, which is the Hydra base where she was experimented on, as was Pietro. And we get a moment of, so the way they're experimenting is they're literally, so Hydra has the scepter at this point. They have the scepter after the events of the Avengers, as seen in Avengers Endgame. The strike team, which is basically just Hydra, shows up, grabs the scepter, and leaves. And so what they're doing is they're having their test subjects walk in and touch the scepter. And so far, everybody has died. Every single person who's done that has died. So they're just kind of going through people. And so Wanda steps in, and before she can get to the scepter starts shaking, and the gem, like the casing on the gem, actually comes out and approaches her. And as she goes to touch it, it bursts open, and the Mind Stone is just there and shining in her face. And as she looks at it, there's this shadowy figure that's coming out of it. And it looks like essentially the comic version of the Scarlet Witch. And, you know, that could be connected with why she used that as her costume, which obviously was a reference to the comics. Excuse me. But that could be why she went with that for costume in the Halloween episode itself. But interestingly, the headgear that she's got there looks very similar to the shape that the leader of the Witches' Coven had, like for her energy crown. And I'm curious if that's meant to be a connection there. But so she then passes out, and you see you see two things. One, you see that the scepter is still there with the casing and presumably the Mind Stone side. So that was all just a vision to her. Like, she just saw that, but it didn't quite happen in real life. And also the video footage, much like the broadcast footage in We Interrupt This Program, it cuts out for the entire duration of whatever the event was. She's standing, and then she's on the ground. Scepter hasn't moved. So that's kind of an interesting bit there, that she's already having this impact on broadcast signals and TV screens the whole time. So that's kind of neat. We get to see a little bit of that. We get a little bit more of a backstory to her time with Hydra and like how that whole thing went down. I was kind of hoping we'd either get Baron von Strucker or Dr. List, but we didn't get either of them, which is a bummer, but what you gonna do? So after that, we go to the Avengers compound, which I'm a little confused exactly when this is, because it's after Age of Ultron, but before Civil War, and it's a pretty tiny window, I think. That's supposed to be like a very short window, if I remember correctly. Like, it's within a period of a year. But basically, she is pretty devastated. This is shortly after Age of Ultron. She's pretty devastated, and she asks Vision to come in. And she talks to them for a while. They kind of discuss that, like, essentially she feels like she's just getting pulled down, and anytime she stands back up, it just pulls her back down again. And Vision tries to, talk her through it, and is like, I don't understand loss. I've never had anyone, so I don't understand what it's like to lose someone. And they kind of have a discussion about like what it, like the fact, essentially the idea, it's a common enough sort of messaging is the fact that it hurts means that it was real, kind of deal. Like that it was important and it was worth having. And they have this discussion, and this is when she's watching Malcolm in the Middle. And it's cute that he like kind of is asking, like, is it funny because he received grievous injury? Is that the joke? Like, but they talk for a bit, and he comforts her, and eventually, like, he turns back and he laughs at like a joke that's going on the screen, and Wanda laughs too. And it's like, all right, this is how Wanda started to like come out of it, which actually I think is a really important bit of scene for two reasons. One, it really highlights like what Wanda's going through in her life, where she just keeps losing things, losing people over and over. But it also helps highlight, because when you watch Avengers Infinity War, you don't get the sense that there's been a buildup with Vision and the Scarlet Witch, with Vision and Wanda, but this one kind of helps backfill some of that in. It's like, we didn't see a lot of their relationship together, but you can kind of see like why they grew attached to each other. And that was that, he was someone that she like could talk to and who was there to kind of help her come out of that funk and like, learn to be herself again and all of that. And it was nice to kind of explore that a little bit and see that moment. And last but not least, we get Wanda's visit to S.W.O.R.D. headquarters. And in an earlier episode, Hayward was pretty clear about she came in and stole Vision's body and went back into the Hex and took it with her. And we actually get to see what went down. And we see that she went to S.W.O.R.D. Hayward actually invited her in when she arrived. And they talk, and she sees, it's a really gruesome scene, actually, of these S.W.O.R.D. scientists dismantling Vision in a way where, like, you see a hand that's, like, half torn off, and you see them have an arm that they pull apart with, like, the wiring kind of stretching between them, and it's just, like, they're doing an incredible job with the metaphors here, because that is horrifying, and Wanda, it, like, freaks out, understandably so, and she, like, Hayward keeps referring to Vision as it. He refers to Vision as being $3 billion of vibranium that he won't allow to just be buried in the ground. And he ends it by saying, like, she basically insists that, like, I'm the next of kin. I deserve to bury him. He deserves this. And he says, like, well, no, he's not yours. And she basically is like, fuck this, breaks the glass, goes down to him. And Hayward calls off the S.W.O.R.D. goons that had, like, guns drawn on her. She kind of, like, touches his forehead and uses some of her energy, and she says, like, she can't feel him. She can't feel him there anymore, and she just leaves. She doesn't actually steal the body. So she gets in the car, and there's, like, a little piece of paper, and they go to, she drives off, and she winds up arriving in Westview, New Jersey, where she drives around and you see some of these people in the town, the guy who becomes Herb, the guy who becomes, was it Dottie's husband? I think Phil. You see Mrs. Hart. You see all these people who are about to become the characters of this show. And she's just driving around town and doing all this stuff. And she eventually arrives at this plot. And it's the foundation of a house, but there's no house built yet. And she opens the paper, and it's the deed to the address, and it has a little red heart, and inside it says, "To grow old in, V." And it's just like, oh, that really, like, just stuck right in there really hard. And Wanda breaks down and explodes with energy that just generates the house right then and there. And then she explodes again and creates the entire Hex. Like, you can watch it, this energy washing over everything, and it's like red magic with, like, the static. It's like the TV, feedbacky kind of look that a lot of the red magic has in this series. And all of a sudden you notice, as you go back in the home, the red magic has kind of a golden glow to it, and it pulls back, and you see that there's another figure there, and it becomes Vision. She creates Vision out of nothingness. She didn't make it from the body. She just creates him entirely from nothing, which is why when he comes out of the Hex and he starts collapsing, there's nothing inside of him, because at the end of the day, the entire thing is the illusion created by her, which unfortunately means that it seems like this Vision is not going to be permanent. Like, not as a character. I'm not expecting to be permanent as a character. I think he's going to have to actually die for like finality here, so that she can move on. But I think he physically cannot exist outside the Hex, because he's sort of part of the Hex, basically. And so we see all of this, and Agatha is finally like, all right, I get it. Here we go. Like, and she goes outside, and she's got the kids, like, strung up with some kind of purple magic. And Wanda now is outside of the house too, and she can finally use her magic as well. And Agatha's basically saying like, that magic, all of that power, I get it now. You're the Scarlet Witch. Basically, it's like this is forbidden. Was it chaos magic? Her ability to create, something from nothing, means something very specific to Agatha, and so dubs her the Scarlet Witch, which is kind of a neat way to bring that moniker in, 6 years after she first appeared. Also, it's kind of neat. It's really neat to me that we get to watch the characters kind of unravel the mystery along with us, because we're all just kind of in the ride together, watching all this stuff happen. Like, Agatha doesn't know what's going on, Wanda doesn't know what's going on, and it all just kind of culminates. But actually, yeah, as she creates Vision, but she creates him in that 50s style, as everything else is black and white, and she's still in color until she kind of steps forward and into the black and white. He says, "Welcome home, Wanda," and they sit down and they watch TV right then and there. And it's just, there you go. We do get another stinger in this one, and as soon as I saw that Vision was not created from the body, I had a really nervous feeling about it, and it wound up coming true, which is Hayward has been trying to dismantle and rebuild Vision about 100 different ways, and they couldn't power him either until they had Wanda. And that 80s drone they pulled out that was crackling with her energy is able to be used as a power source. And Vision, who is now this really ghastly white, turns on. His eyes are really glimmeringly white. His whole body is white. His hands are white. The crest in his forehead is also white, and it's not shaped like the Mind Stone. It's actually almost shaped like a miniature arc reactor. Not the whole circle thing, but the little triangle one that's there. So I'm curious if that's going to get any lip service. But ironically, so this means that we have a Marvel property where Wanda Maximoff and the Vision are going to be confronting the villains of the show, who turn out to be another evil witch and an evilized version of the Vision. So when I inevitably take out that checklist later, we'll have to make sure to give that a little ding for the carbon copy villain. The white getup reminds me of, I want to say, the Invincible Iron Man. There was a point where Iron Man was made into a villain in the comics, and I think it was I don't know the name of the event. There was one where basically the good guys were bad guys were good kind of deal, and Iron Man had this white suit, and it kind of reminded me a little of that. But yeah, so now we have stakes for the final episode. We have Wanda versus Agatha. We have an evil Vision. We don't know. Oh yeah, that's right. In the last episode, Darcy and Vision were driving around in the funnel cake van. Vision goes whoosh, and floats out of it, and then we don't see him for the rest of that episode, and we don't see him for this episode. So we've got a lot of missing pieces here. We got Wanda and Agatha we've seen. We got Dark Vision. We don't know where regular Vision is. We don't know where Darcy is. We don't know where Monica and fake Pietro are. We don't know where Jimmy is. There's a lot of moving pieces. This episode was the longest one so far at 47 minutes minus credits time. I would have to go and actually look to see how long the episode actually is, but it's longer, I think, than, let's see, the previous longest one was on a very special episode, which was 42 minus whatever. This one's 5 minutes longer than that. So it's probably around 35, 40 minutes or something. So yeah, very long episode. It wouldn't surprise me if the last one's going to be an hour long. But we'll see how that goes. I'm going to give this episode an 8 out of 10. I think this one is, let me pull my thing up here. I think this one was really good as far as pulling a lot of the elements of the show together. The stakes are much clearer. We get a really good look into Wanda's psyche and how she became the way she is, not just in the show, but also, in Age of Ultron and in Civil War and in Infinity War and Endgame. We get a really good picture of her life and all the things that have made her the way she is. And we get to see these other characters as well. Oh, also, fun reference to the two callbacks, actually. One of them, Vision did say in a previous episode that he can't remember life before the Hex. Like, he knows what he's supposed to be, but he doesn't know about his life, and that's because he didn't have one. He isn't the Vision. He's a copy of the Vision. He is the personality of the Vision that Wanda remembers given life, but he's not the Avenger that was in Age of Ultron, that was created in Age of Ultron, or in the Infinity War, any of those. So that's kind of an interesting explanation for why he cannot remember anything before, because there was no before for him. Also, in the episode with the dog, Agatha notably breaks character for a second, and I was wondering, because like they showed it in a way where it was like, so Wanda is talking about the dead dog, and the kids are like, but you can bring him back to life, and like in a TV show, there's not a lot of crosstalk. The Marvel movies do crosstalk pretty well once in a while, like they'll do some stuff with it, but they don't. But most movies and TV shows don't do much crosstalk. While the three of them are talking, Agatha just interrupts, but not in a way where she steps on anyone's lines. She just kind of like talks like at the same time. And she said, wait, you can do that? Like, she completely breaks character when she realizes that Wanda can bring people and things back to life, which is something that Agatha says that she can do in this episode, but she needs access to the body, which is why she didn't get actual Pietro, is because Pietro is buried in Sokovia and also full of bullets. So that's kind of an interesting thing there too. But yeah, I would say this was a really, really good episode. Not quite as good as the very special episode, since that's the one where we get the big blowout between Wanda and Vision. But honestly, I think this was really well done. We got a lot of good examinations on grief and how people handle that. We got a lot of really good character development and exploration, and I really, really liked it. I give this an 8. And I would love to hear what you guys think of the episode, as well as what you are expecting for the finale, the stunning conclusion, and that'll be it for WandaVision. We had an audio thing, so I apologize if I like resaid anything there, but yeah, we'll see you next time for the final episode, and looking forward to it. Bye.